Dan, welcome back. Your podcast was so popular, or podcasts were so popular. Now we're doing a live Q&A with the Dad Edge Alliance Mastermind Community Men. And these guys, they want to know more and they want to ask you questions. So it's not going to be me asking questions this go around. It's going to be these amazing men. So Dan, what I'd like to do is just share, just bring everybody up to speed, maybe 30 seconds that people heard the intro, but just what you do and how you go about it.
Sure. I'm a parent coach. That's my niche right now. Helping equip parents with a set of tools, strategy, mindset, so that they can have the deepest, most healthy connection with their kid. And a lot of the families I work with come to me because they're having a lot of challenging behaviors with their children, and traditional parenting strategies aren't working. So rather than things continuing to get stuck or go backwards, they get some coaching from me over a 90-day period and just learn a specific approach to help them transform the kid from the inside out.
Very good. I can attest to, so Dan's a part of our Dad Edge Accelerator program, which is our dad business owners mastermind. And Dan has done what we call in that program sensei sessions, which that basically means kind of what he's doing here, really, which is just for those men where our guys can ask questions, or he literally just does a 45-minute Q&A of some sort, or he's just literally teaching very specific skill sets. And the guys in that group, man, they love him. We've implemented a lot of different things in that group because of him, but I can tell you he's definitely leveled up the men in that group as well. So we're going to start off with Craig. Craig, go ahead and just chime in with your question, my friend. And you're on mute, by the way. There you go.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for taking my question. My question is, my wife and I right now are going through a dark time with our daughter. It's a long history, but I'll just get to what's happening right now. Is she's dealing with extreme anxiety for about a year, to the point where she can't go to school. She's starting to be depressed, and she started self-harming herself. We're trying she's now getting the help she needs. We're trying to follow what they're telling us for positivity, but she just does not receive any of it and blows it off. And it doesn't seem like it's working. Just how do we go about just keep supporting her, even though she's not accepting it?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how old's your daughter?
She's 14.
14. So just so kind of everybody on the call understands, I have an 11-year-old son that has really intense anxiety, to the point where he'll have panic attacks before school. And this has been the hardest year by far. I mean, he's struggled with this ever since he was in pre-K, but he's in 6th grade now, and this is the hardest year he's ever had, where we've had to get professional help as well. So I know the helpless feeling it is as a parent when you're trying to help your kid overcome anxiety and it just doesn't seem like anything's getting better. But here's a couple things I would just challenge you to think about is, anytime you're working with anxiety, you have to realize you're working with an irrational brain. So trying to convince your kid that he can or she can do it, or try to have a rational conversation about like minimizing why they're so stressed and letting them know that it's not that big of a deal, is going to be a big waste of your time. And from the model that I use, we call that just giving unnecessary energy to the problem. The more you try to convince your kid not to be anxious, the more anxious they're going to be. It's like trying to speak a foreign language to someone that's never spoke that language before. It's just going to be a disconnect. There's going to be all kinds of tension around it. The other thing is, and this is where I found the most effectiveness, is be relentless about proving to your kid and revealing to your kid moments where they're showing any amount of courage and bravery. The most success I've had with dealing with any kids, especially kids with anxiety disorders, when you can prove to them and reveal to them moments where they're showing courage and bravery in any setting, not just the settings about going to school. Because this isn't about being less anxious and less fearful, it's about being more brave. So what would be a couple examples of ways that your kid's shown any amount of courage or bravery? I guess I'm asking that question directly.
At the moment, she's literally not doing much of anything. She's really shut down altogether. So it's hard. It's even right now hard to find anything to try and prop her up for what she does. The only thing we have right now that she seems really dedicated towards is her. We have a 7-month-old boy in the house, and she's absolutely dedicated to him.
Right. So can I challenge you a little bit on this one?
Yes, please.
Sure. So there is an immense amount of courage and bravery that your daughter is showing that you're just not aware of right now, because we typically think about courage and bravery when they're doing something that's really, really hard. You said that she's going to see a counselor. She's getting some professional help. Is that right? Yes, no?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? My Wi-Fi glitched.
Oh, okay. You said that you were getting your daughter was talking to someone, getting some like help from a counselor or coach or something.
Yes, she is. She's on her second counselor. The first one caused actually more damage than good, and this
Sure.
one, she's pushing hard on the family values, communication, positivity.
Right. Well, the fact that your daughter goes to those appointments and whether she participates a lot or not takes an immense amount of courage. The fact that she hasn't given up yet, that she hasn't checked out, she might be self-harming, but she hasn't tried to end her life. Like what I am really relentless and intentional about is, did the kid get up today? Did they go to school today? Did they talk about how they're feeling today? Did they get any homework done? Did they go to a counselor? Because any moment where they're doing something that's required of them, especially if you're a highly anxious kid, takes tremendous amount of courage. In fact, courage and bravery cannot exist unless you're uncomfortable or anxious or stressed out to begin with. So anytime she's highly anxious, it actually means that there's courage and bravery that's operating. How often are you bringing that to her attention, and how could you maybe level that up in a way to, because what's really important for her is right now she sees herself as completely incompetent, ill-equipped, that the anxiety is like driving the ship here. So if you can start to point out, even if they're small moments where she's showing any amount of courage and bravery, that's going to help. The other part too is, and I don't know if you're doing this or not, but this is like really, really common, is when kids are anxious, we try to prove to them that it's not that big of a deal, that they can do it. And we have these conversations with them about, remember how you did it last time, or what can you do differently? And anytime we do that, we're connecting to the anxiety. So that's something you should stop right away. Most therapists screw this up, and they start to have all this connection and relationship around the anxiety, and it makes the anxiety much more powerful, meaningful, and you're shooting yourself in the foot left and right. What I do with my son is I'll acknowledge how he's feeling, but I am not going to solve his problem. I ask questions like, I wonder how you're going to manage that, or I wonder what tools that you've learned that you can access. Rather than giving suggestions and strategies and offering that, because I want him problem solving, because when he problem solves and takes ownership for that, then he gets the credit, not a medicine, not a doctor, not a therapist, not a parent. And that's one of the biggest things that people with anxiety really need, is they need to believe in themselves and have competency. And the only way they get that is if they experience ownership over the problem. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. And that definitely opens my eyes up to a different avenue to try than what they've been showing us.
Yeah, I'll be honest. If I didn't have this model that I use, I would be a train wreck when I'm dealing with my son and anxiety, because like I start to feel out of control. I start to feel helpless. I want to start forcing him to go to school. And anytime I do that, it just throws gasoline on the fire. But when I get out of the way, I'm like, you got to go to school. I wonder how you're going to figure out how to manage it in a way that you can get yourself to school. And then any step he takes in the right direction, I just lay it on like, hey, you're having a hard time, but you got your shoes on. That takes a lot of courage and bravery when you're worked up. Or you're telling me how you feel rather than just hiding in your room, which is what he used to do. That takes a lot of courage and bravery. Like I know my kid used to be really into video games, like Mario Brothers. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Mario Brothers, but there's all these levels that is the more you progress, the more you experience, and the more you play the game, the more equipped you get. And so I'm really big on revealing to the kids, here's a step I see you taking in the right direction. You're leveling up. You're getting more competency. You're being more resilient. You're being more courageous, and that's the best medicine for anxiety, in my opinion.
Oh, that's absolutely great. I'm definitely going to start putting those tools to work tonight.
I love
I
it.
appreciate that very much.
Hey,
Sure.
Dan, I don't want to take away from our next guest, but I had a conversation with my oldest last night. We went out to see a movie and then we took him to dinner, and he shared with me some things that he was going through. Where he's far behind on a few assignments in school right now because he was really sick and he was out of school for 4 days. And I was like, hey, you know how I asked him this question, which by the way, I'm sure you're familiar with this question because we ask it an accelerator's generative question. We were sitting there over dinner having a great conversation. And I just asked him, I said, hey, I said, is there anything you want to share with me? And by the way, I told him, I said, I have no agenda with this question. I'm not baiting you for something. I know no information, but is there anything you want to share with me that you haven't shared that you feel that you want to, but maybe you're afraid to? And he kind of like smiled. And he's like, yeah. I was like, what's up? And he just said, I'm doing pretty bad in 3 out of my 7 classes. I was like, oh yeah, well, tell me about that. And he said, I was absent, for 4 days. I fell behind and I'm missing assignments. And he's like, to be honest, like I'm very overwhelmed. Now he's done this many times before. And when he gets overwhelmed, he kind of gets paralyzed and like, then he distracts himself with like his Oculus or does something else, hangs out with friends. He doesn't even know where to start. So we've gone through this several times where, I'm like, I always refer to it. I was like, hey man, like it's the staircase of 150 stairs, right? We don't go from the bottom to the top in one fell swoop. We take them like, 1 or 2 at a time, and that's how we've always ratcheted down. And he's always been successful, always. But I asked him a question last night. And as you just answered this, I'm like, man, I might've done the wrong thing. He seemed like he took it okay, but maybe I want to make sure the audience heard this because I thought it was great and perhaps it wasn't. I told him, I was like, Ethan, man, I have so much faith in you. I was like, you've been down this road. I was like, and you've always gotten out of it. You always know what to do. And he's like, yeah, but it should. And I'm just asking, should we not do that? Should we reframe a different way?
It's about timing. So if he's highly anxious and saying, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, and you're connecting to the I can't do it by saying, oh, sure you can. Remember X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
You're actually sending the message that I don't believe you can either. That's why I'm trying to convince you otherwise. Okay. But if he's saying, Dad, here's kind of what I'm struggling with, and your feedback is like, that takes a lot of courage to ask for help. And you know what? I have full faith in you because X, Y, and Z. You're connecting to him asking for help, which is a positive trait.
Okay, cool. All right. Awesome. So I did it half wrong. I did, but
no, I think you did it half right.
You're see, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. Ian, you're up, my man.
So I got 2 girls, 9 and 7, and they're ADHD, ODD. Not this weekend past, but the weekend past, we had a blowout at the beginning of an outing, and then it flared into the car to the point where there was some like fist thrown from my oldest to my youngest. And then when we got home, we tried to separate them to the point where they were like starting to throw stuff in the house, wreck the house. They end up hit their mom pretty bad in the arm, and trying to keep calm in the situation. But like, I don't know how to, when they're in that rage mode at each other or in a situation, what is the best tactic to, one, get them to not hurt anyone, and to also get them to regulate a little bit better, because both of them don't really deal with their emotions in the moment to when they get like when they flare up real fast.
Yeah, that sounds extremely stressful. Anytime you have kids being aggressive towards each other, towards the adults, part of your brain that gets activated is that fight or flight center. And that's great if there's a fire, you know, put the fire out or run for safety. But when it comes to parenting, it oftentimes can just lead to a lot of missteps. I would say, I'm going to answer this in two ways. Number one, what to do proactively before those moments happen, and then what you can do in the moments where you need to get involved if it's a safety issue. You started out by saying my kid has ADD and ODD. Just want to clarify what that means. So it means attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. A lot of times there's impulsivity, intense emotions, hard time kind of regulating and problem solving. Then ODD kind of just stands for oppositional defiant, which is kind of a fancy way of saying kids like power struggles and like don't handle the word no very well. So the thing to do, and this is where I get the most success, is ask yourself, how can I reveal to my kid when they're showing self-control? Kids that have a hard time with impulsivity and are very defiant, they get this big charge out of being in control by breaking rules and creating chaos. There's this like need for control, a need for power, a need for competency, because internally they have a hard time regulating themselves. And most of the time, the way that we go about treatment in those situations is we come up with coping skills, we come up with safety plans, we come up with different ways to help you manage. And unfortunately, for the timing that we teach that is when they're having problems. Most of the kids aren't open to learning when they're being disciplined or confronting or already dysregulated. So the time to talk about self-control is when you see evidence of self-control. The time to talk about healthy power is when you see them using their power in a way that's good. And I can't remember if I talked about it on the most recent podcast, but I want you to make a list of maybe 5 or 6 rules, how you treat each other. And I want them all to start with the word no. So like no hitting, no back talk, no yelling, no screaming, like the things that kind of drive you nuts. Have all those rules stated with the word no. And when your kids are not breaking those rules, that's the time to reveal to them like, hey, you're really angry, but you're not hitting your sister. That shows self-control. Or you could have broke this rule, but you chose not to. That shows respect. Looking at all the moments where rules are not being broken, which is probably 80-90% of the time if you're really looking at things objectively. And confronting your kids with evidence that you have power, you have self-control, and it's when you're not breaking rules. Because the truth is, kids can break rules 24/7. Any moment they're not is an opportunity to give them credit for choosing not and saying that this is something healthy and good, like self-control and respect. That's what you need to be doing, and especially for kids that have ADHD or ODD symptoms or behavior that's kind of congruent with that. That is by far the most effective strategy I've found to really help shape and turn behavior around as quickly as possible. Now, the second part is, well, first of all, Ian, does that make sense? Is that pretty clear?
Yeah, that makes good sense. That's something that we've never tried.
Sure. Well, and again, most professionals wouldn't even recommend doing
that's
that.
definitely worth. I'll try and implement that.
Okay, so that's kind of part A. Part B is, what do you do when they are being aggressive, or when they are being unsafe, or when they are being rude? It is super, super important that the environment is as calm and in control as possible, and that starts with you. You have to be calm. You have to be at peace. You cannot show your cards because you don't want to inadvertently throw more intensity or gasoline on the fire. So do whatever you have to do to kind of keep kids safe, but do the bare minimum as far as language. I wouldn't be saying, stop it, don't quit it. If you don't stop, this will happen. Don't get all ramped up, because most of the time when stress starts to hit within the family, the adults start to get ramped up with them, and it just makes things 10 times worse. What do you guys currently like? I'm just kind of curious, like, what does the discipline look like when it gets to that point?
Ian, I muted you because there was a lot of background noise.
Oh.
So if you can unmute me again.
Could you repeat that question? My internet kind of went funky on me.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, what are you currently doing when they start to hit each other or start to hit their mom?
Basically, I'll guide them the best I can. I'll give them the option of going to the room to calm down, or away from each other. And if they don't, then I'll try and guide them into the room just to give them a safe spot. I just to get them to get regulated, and then there are times where my youngest, where I'll have to hold her until she calms down,
Okay.
because she'll escalate to the point where she'll go after the animals as well.
Okay, so I would encourage you to keep doing that, but just be very cognizant of less talking is better, less repeating yourself is better, and as long as you can do that calmly, do that. The piece I would add is anytime somebody gets hurt, whether it's physically or emotionally, once the kid calms down, like, all of their privileges are on hold until they make amends with the person that they hurt. So I always give good feedback, like, hey, I see that you calmed yourself down. You're not being aggressive anymore. You're back in control. That shows a lot of self-control. Mom got hurt when you hit her. What do you think she needs from you to feel better? What can you do to show her you're sorry? And there needs to be some kind of action attached to that. It can't just be a verbal apology.
Okay.
And when that happens, it's actually a process called restorative justice. When the offender or the person that did the hurting actually genuinely apologizes and does something to show they're sorry, the other person can authentically forgive, and then the person that did the hurting, their integrity gets restored. When that process is skipped, it just starts to stack offense after offense after offense. And then there's all this unnecessary tension that's happening even in moments where things are calm. So I kind of overloaded you with a lot there, but just kind of to sum that up, be focused on power and self-control and respect when rules are not being broken. When it does get to those kind of crisis situations, remain as calm as possible and very powered down. And then make sure you add that making the amends or that restorative process so that both people within the relationship can move forward, rather than, because when that doesn't happen, then resentment builds in, or the person that was hurt is kind of on edge, waiting for the person to snap against, kind of always in this like protective mode. And it's not helpful or healing for anyone.
Yeah, like me and my wife are pretty much on edge a lot.
Yeah.
At times, like for the next explosion.
Yeah.
So it's not really helpful right now for us.
Yeah, try those two things. I think that would make a big, in my experience, that you get the biggest return on your investment, and you get back online as quickly as possible when you follow through with those couple of things.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
And then Dan, what just the psychology of less words for kids?
Well, because kids are looking for connection. And from the model that I use, like, our connection, our attention, relationship, that is the most powerful reinforcement. That's the prize. And when kids are misbehaving and they're amping up, and we're connecting to that with a lot of language and a lot of our time, our attention, we're actually rewarding them with what they're looking for. And so the way this plays out is like, stop hitting your mom, or don't do that. And then the kid does it anyway. Then you have a discussion about, why did you do that? If, like, remember, it's important to be respectful. And when you do this, it's not respectful. What can you do different? Now you're giving passion to misbehavior, which for a kid is super confusing. It's because I get all this passion from you, which is what I'm after, but it's when I'm being a pain in the butt, I must be a pain in the butt. And the more pain in the butt I can be, the more I can get from you.
Mm. That makes so much sense. You know, when I was growing up, I used to tell my stepdad, because I was like, are we going to have a 2 longer talk? like when I was like 6. Because dude, he would sit me down at the kitchen table and like it felt like hours. I'm sure it was probably like 15 minutes, but it literally I was just like, please just stop talking. And it was so ineffective. Like nothing he was saying was even sinking in, you know, especially at that age. So that makes so much sense.
Mhm.
Dan, I've got a couple of anonymous questions here in the chat that I'm just going to read off.
Sure.
So my older child is high energy seeking, has required a lot of attention. The whole house walked on eggshells with his moods and outbursts from age 5 to 8. Less now at the age of 9. His younger sister has learned from a young age to observe and keep things calm and safe. How can I cultivate her sense of self and own interest instead of being a shadow of older brother? Overcome concern of her codependency foundation. I have pushed for one-on-one time, own interests, and her choice in activities.
Can you read the question one more time with
Sure.
something about identity? How can I?
Yeah. My older child is high energy seeking, has required a lot of attention. The whole house walked on eggshells with his moods and outbursts from age 5 to 8. So now at age 9, his younger sister has learned from a young age to observe and keep things calm and safe. How can I cultivate her sense of self and own interest instead of being a shadow of her older brother?
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. How can I cultivate a sense of identity is really what you're looking at, a separateness from the brother.
And real quick too, that there might be more here. So there's another addition to this chat, and I can read that as well. So I don't know if these are two separate questions or not, but I'm just going to read it anyway. My older son, at his worst, would tackle and clothesline his sister or throw objects at his mother or sister. That got a full-on reaction from me. I explored and learned why that triggered me so much. 1, it challenged my values and respect and stewardship, and I screwed up. I would blow up. And 2, I grew up in a neglected household and didn't have anyone to watch out for bullying or aggressive older siblings and neighbors. Awareness of these two foundations let me forgive myself and choose a different way now. I do separate them as well as when one is acting out against the other, but with a positive context so that you can each do what you like. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a few different thoughts. I think the first thing is, you know, the younger sister developed a set of strategies to kind of cope with the chaos, right? So how do I keep the peace? How do I have no problems? How do I be as you know, compliant or codependent as possible? Because the house probably can't tolerate any more chaos or stress. And I think the problem with that is, if that kind of starts to manifest or that starts to grow, what happens is you become a people pleaser and you kind of really don't have your own identity. I think that's what I'm gathering from that. So the best way to go about doing this is forget about what happened historically. That is not going to serve you well in building something now. I kind of one of the visual exercises I take parents on is, imagine that you're a defense attorney and your kid is on trial and the accusation is codependent in this case, or in the last case, it's ODD or ADHD. And, you know, the court has come kind of to the table here and they got it, you know, exhibit or evidence A through Z. Here's all the examples of how they've been codependent. And it's your job to convince a jury without a shadow of a doubt that the decision is not guilty. And the only way you can do that is if you have evidence on the contrary. So what's the opposite of codependent? Is it independent? Is it confident? Is it independent? Like you have to determine what that is. What do you want your child? What quality do you want your child to have a deep belief in? Once you have that, you have to go to war. Like there is a battle for your kid's identity, for their heart, their soul. And it's your job to kind of convince them without a shadow of a doubt that you are not codependent, you are confident, you are independent. And when you go about doing that, you have to provide evidence to support that. You know, so I'd be like, hey, say she's even watching her own TV show. Like, hey, I see you pursuing your own interests. You're watching this TV show. Nobody else in the house watches it. That shows you pursuing things that are interesting to you. What else are you interested in? Yeah, that's again, you're making choices for yourself. You're pursuing your own interests. Everybody has kind of individual ideas in this home. When you see her stand up for herself, even if it's like asking for help, you're being assertive. You're standing up for yourself. When you have a need, you ask for it. You don't just hold it in. So that would be my like strategic plan of attack is anytime a kid has this identity or this kind of place in the family that you perceive as not super healthy based on siblings, like pretend you're a defense attorney and go to war and provide irrefutable evidence. Because what happens is when you provide this feedback over and over and over again, the kid starts to believe that it's true. And once they believe it's true, then they act in a way that's congruent with that. Trying to go back and talk about history, you're just rehashing stuff that you have no power and control over. That's what I got.
That is really helpful. I want to open this up for anybody else who has any questions. While you guys think on that, oh, we have another question. If I have limited time with my kids and limited communication with their mom, how can I make the most lasting impact for them to know that they are loved and valued?
Yeah, it's kind of, I was actually talking with the dad this morning on a call about this. What comes to mind is when I first learned about the approach that we're talking about, it's called the nurtured heart approach. I was in a training with the guy that created this, and he opened it up to questions. And my first question was, if I do this on a limited amount of time, I have like an hour with this kid a week, because I was a counselor at the time. Like, is it going to make any difference if they go home and the parents undo everything I do, or he goes to school and the teachers are like harassing the kid? And the guy looked me right in the eye and he said, absolutely. and the reason that was really meaningful to me is it helped me understand that my impact is extremely powerful. Like, your voice as a dad, even if it's limited, is necessary and needed. So the way that you can be is really strategic with that is that you're not hoping you're making an impact, you're making an impact. So start with character traits that are really important to you. In the moments that you have with your kids, give them feedback of how they're showing those qualities. One of the other things, it depends on how old your kids are, but as my kids have gotten older, a lot of the feedback I give them is through technology. I'll text them, I'll record a video and send it to them. I don't like social media. I don't like Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok, but if I can get on my kid's account and send them messages when I'm not with them, when they're at school or I'm traveling, I write them notes, I send them letters. Like, you don't have to be face to face. So if you have a limited amount of time, how can you create more connection in the moments where you're not with them? That's where I found them most effective. And the other thing too is if there's other influences that aren't communicating that you're loved or you're valued, and you only have a limited amount of time, maximize that time, because what's helpful is your kids to be able to differentiate that when I'm in this home, this is kind of how things operate, but when I'm in this home, it's very different. Then they have the ability to say that the world is different depending on the environment I go in. A lot of times when kids grow up in just one home and it's not very healthy, they start to generalize that, hey, the whole world operates this way. But if I'm with dad, and when I'm with dad, he treats me this way and he reveals these messages and teaches me that I'm loved and valued, and here's all the evidence. Like, what a powerful gift to give that you can use as evidence to the contrary when I'm in different environments. So that when I have the freedom to choose who I'm going to connect to when I become an adult, I'm going to choose one that's more like dad versus one that's, maybe some of the other adults that aren't super healthy.
This individual says, I try to give constant feedback for showing values I see. Over time, they see, hear, and feel it. When we do volunteering together, which by the way, awesome. Kudos to you for doing volunteering. That's awesome. Together every weekend, together every weekend, we are together where their contribution is visible. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Any time that you're having one-on-one time with your kids and you're serving others, I think you get like compounding effect, because not only are they feeling loved and valued because they're having quality time, but they can see their impact on other people, which is really the way we're built. You know, we're built to love each other and love ourselves. And when we operate that way, there's all this cool neuroscience that happens where all these really cool neurotransmitters get dumped into our brain and we feel better.
Dan, I have a question for you. And by the way, those of you guys who are on, we have 14 men on. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you got, we probably have time for one more question after this, but guys who are raising multiple kids, I think that's probably most of the world, right? I have 4. And one thing I've noticed is that I have to love and interact with my kids. All 4 of them are totally different than the other, like totally. And how this was really revealed to me last night when I was having dinner with my 16-year-old, which my 16-year-old and I, our conversations are very deep. He tells me a lot, which I absolutely love. It's not hard to get him to talk about details and information and that kind of thing. Like he's an open book, and it's very easy. I've noticed with my 15-year-old, he's more stoic. He's got a marshmallow of a heart, but he's also, with him, the way to crack the code with him is to do something active or do something that's more of an experience before we sit down and talk, or use a lot of humor. That seems to crack the code. And that helps a lot. With my 9-year-old, again, it's effortless. But my 6-year-old, and he's going to be 7 this week, Dan, I have to admit, like, and you would think since I'm down this road, like, 3 times already, I'd probably figure this out, but I haven't. I don't know if it's the fact that maybe I'm one of the weird people in the world, because everyone always talks about like, oh, wait, they're teenagers, it's awful, or whether they're older, preteen. But my 3 oldest are 9, 15, and almost 17. Dude, I love these ages because they're like young men / little boys, and the conversations, like, I can have like total conversations with these kids. The 6-year-old, like, he is like squirrel, right? Everything is like, he's just like all over the place. And I find myself trying to connect with him even through like little kid stuff, but I also find myself getting like frazzled with him because I'm like, dude, can we just focus on like one thing at a time? And I don't know if I have a hard time with the age, or if I haven't figured out his personality, or what it is. And again, you would think since I've been down this road 3 times in the work that we do, like I could crack the code on this one. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to best connect with him.
I'm going to use some Larry psychology on you real quick, but
All right.
How is this narrative that you would think that I would know how to operate since I've been down this road 3 times? How's that serving you when it comes time to show up with them?
Yeah, not good at all. It's terrible.
So you can stop shitting all over yourself that you should know how to do this because you already have 3 kids. This is a complete, unique, separate human being that has nothing to do with the other 3. Are you asking like how am I more patient, or how do I connect? How do I accept him for who he is? How do I not get so irritated with his squirreliness?
All the above. So I would say mostly like, how do I, out of all 4 of the boys, I feel the least connected to him. Now, granted, he's a little guy, but I look back on, and again, I know I shouldn't do this, and you even just said this, but I look back on like Ethan, Mason, and Lawson, and I'm like, man, I remember when Ethan and Mason were 7, and I remember like feeling like this connection to them. Like I remember that, and I'm trying so hard to get my footing with him, and it's very hard. I don't know if it's like the age difference, or if it's maybe his tiny little personality, but I want so badly to connect with him. And I feel like I'm falling on my face a lot with him.
Yeah, I think, and this is just kind of what's coming up as you're talking. I would say, how would you connect to him if you didn't have 3 other kids? If you had 0 experience with Mason, Ethan, and who's the other one that you're talking about?
Ethan, Mason, Lawson.
Yeah, but pretend, I'm not saying pretend they don't exist, but if they didn't exist and this was your only son, and you weren't being informed by how you connected to the other 3, would you be showing up differently?
Yeah. Well, I was literally having this conversation with Jessica last night. Like, I probably would be doing this differently. Yeah.
And that's where I would start, is like, he's my only son. When I'm with him, when I'm trying to connect, and he's my only son. He's not a little bit of the other 3. My tools that I have with the other 3, it's just not, it's not that they're the wrong tools, but they don't connect with him the same way. Kind of see you shaking your head. What's going on?
Because I feel like a total idiot, because that is so simple and it makes so much sense. And I can easily do that. I can easily flip that switch. And that's probably what I should have been doing there. I just should have, but that makes total sense. It's exactly what we were talking about before we hit record today, with very, very simple things. And we were talking about resilience. And I told you guys I was having breakfast with one of our Alliance guys over the weekend, and we were talking about how to remain calm and how to remain resilient, even when things are really, really stressing us. And he said this quote, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Do things to help slow you down. And he explained that all to me, right? About, whether it's like, working out or box breathing or something, just slow the thoughts down, just slow everything down. And I don't know what it was about that, even after doing this work for as long as we have, but that just clicked so much. And what you just said just clicked so much. So I'm going to do that when I'm around him. Like, this is my only son for right now, right? My little guy. And that's the frame I'm going to put it in. Is there more to that, or should I, is that,
yeah,
is it really
one other hack, I was thinking, that book Alter Ego, I can't remember the guy.
Todd Herman.
Yeah. I wonder if you put some kind of totem like that represented a squirrel. Because that response you just had is exactly the way your kid shows up, like this kind of goofy, silly humor. You're just like laughing, your face just lit up. Like, that's probably how your son operates. He's just this like full of life and energy, and nothing really matters, like a squirrel running in the backyard. So if you put on a totem to kind of remind you of that energy or that kind of personality he has, maybe you'll show up a little bit more like-minded with him.
Oh my gosh. See, and this is what I'm talking about. This is iron sharpens iron in its best form. And it's so simple. And this is exactly why we need mentors in our life. We need coaches in our life. We need like-minded people in our life, because they see these blind spots and they're like, dude, well, why don't you have you thought about this? And then suddenly it's like, no, I haven't. I've been overcomplicating it this whole time, but now I see the light. So thank you very much. Before we head out of here, we do have time for one more question. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I do have a hard stop in about 4 minutes. So
okay. So we'll scratch that then.
Well, I can answer it, but you're going to get a quick question, a quick answer.
How about a lightning round question then?
Sure.
I'm looking at Andy Nelson because, his brain goes right there. He's like, what, who, me? I'm kidding. If you don't have a question, that's fine. But usually you're not this quiet on Q&As, but no, that's okay. All right.
Hey, one other thing, Larry, I was thinking is, where do squirrels go to play?
In the backyard.
Okay. And if your son was where's like a place your son would like to go play, where they can get like tons of energy and climb and run and be psychotic?
Kid's obsessed with the playground. Loves the playground.
Yeah. I was thinking like playground, trampoline park, anywhere where you can be as goofy and out of control physically and still be safe.
It's so fascinating. You know how we always talk about these, we can actually close it off with this. We're always giving men advice on how to transition from work dad to family dad. It's one of the hardest transitions. I can't even tell you how many emails I've gotten over the years of like, my hardest time of the day is when I come home from work. So I'm like in this work mode and I'm transitioning to dad, and it's very, very hard. The best evenings that we have, there's this playground that's literally right around the corner from my kids' school, the little guys. So when I go pick them up and I'm like, hey guys, you want to go to the playground for 25 minutes? And it's 25 minutes and they just run around and they go crazy. And like, it's like a breath of fresh air. And then when we get home, it's like, ah. But when we go right from school and we walk in the door, it's like, it's such a roll of the dice. And usually the batting average is not high, that energy has been out. So that's, again, simple advice. Perfect, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
I want to make sure you have a 90-day coaching program. I want to make sure that if men want to connect with you, that they can, guys in the Alliance or guys just in general. Obviously, you guys have heard it. Dan is incredible when it comes to this stuff. Where's the best place for men to find you, to connect with you?
My website, thecompassforlife.com/dad edge. There's like a contact form you can fill out. Just let me know a little bit about what you're looking for. I can reach you really quickly that way.
Got it. Okay, cool. Not to worry, guys. We're going to have the links in the show notes for you guys. All you have to do is head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday91 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday91 for this show. Dan, as always, this is a three-peat, man. Not many guests have come on the podcast 3 times, but you're in high demand. People love your message and love what you do. So thanks for coming back on, man.
Yeah, anytime, man. I love it.
All right, gentlemen, go out and live legendary. Take care.